Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the AgView Pitch. We are going to talk today about wealth, but the first part of the wealth is health. We can't get the wealth without the health. I did a podcast here, I don't know, a year or two ago called The Most Important Piece of Equipment on the Farm. And I thought, hey, it's about time that we review that again, although this one obviously is not titled that. But this is the most important piece of equipment on your farm is you. And it's really all about having a conversation here today that we are going to be heading into spring. If you're listening to this later on, you're going to be heading into a busy season. When you head into a busy season, what do you do? What do you do to take care of yourself? What do you do to take care of the most important commodity on the farm? And it's really not a commodity. You are the farm. You are the person that's making all this stuff happen. And you want to be there for your friends and your family and understand why you do what you do. But with all that said, I want to introduce Dr. House, not the one on TV, but the one here with us today, Dr. Kurt House. How's it going, Kurt?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, doing good. Thank you for being here. In full disclosure, you're my doctor. You have to put up with me occasionally, and I really appreciate that. And you're really super well respected in our community, and you're a great person in the community, and have a great family and everything. And I'm honored to have you on here today to help us talk about a few key things. And I kind of prepped you a little bit. I said I kind of want to hit on some things that, as farmers, we do not do a very good job of when we get busy as hell. Okay, when we go into whether it's planting season or harvest season or whatever, we avoid exercise, we avoid sleep, we avoid nutrition because we eat cupcakes and crap. A lot of us, some of us are luckier than others. Some of us still have moms and grandmas around that bring hot meals out, but more of us, as time goes on, have less and less of that blessing. Another one is mental health. Another key one is safety, and safety is something that's paramount that should be talked about before we even get into planting season or harvest season for that matter. And I threw one other one in there. I told you about online or before we got online here is water. I think we avoid water too a lot of times. I mean, we drink everything else but water, and probably water's the best thing.
Yeah.
So, with that said, I want to start with exercise, and I want to ask you a couple of questions around that. What's happening to us if we're not exercising? If we think we're getting exercise. My dad always used to say that, well, I'm working my ass off. I don't need to exercise. Well, you're not doing any of the shit you need to do to make your body healthy. So talk a little bit about that, Kurt.
Well, you're 100% right. I say, what happens to any piece of equipment when we sit around and we don't use it, whether it's a barn or a tractor or a farm. It breaks down. It doesn't do well. Our bodies do the same thing. Our bodies are intended to work and to do the work. And if we're not getting exercise, then exercise, I tell my patients what we're aiming for is 150 minutes a week of exercise. What that means is I want to have my heart rate elevated, and it doesn't have to be, we don't have to be tacking out at 140, but if we can have our heart rate, above 100 for 150 minutes, and ideally, that would mean, for 20 minutes or to 30 minutes at a time. And if we're doing 30 minutes 5 times a week, there's 150 minutes. So, but if we don't do that, we don't gain the cardiovascular benefits that we should get from exercise.
So the cardiovascular stuff I get really well, and I agree 100%. One thing I've studied, and tell me where I'm wrong or right, one of the two, is that weight training, from the standpoint of strength development and strength maintenance, cartilage, muscle, bone structure, all that kind of stuff. If you're not doing any kind of strength training, at least maybe a couple of times a week, even if you're a farmer and you're carrying buckets around or you're working underneath machinery or carrying shit around, you're still not like systematically working everything. It's kind of it's like hit and miss random stuff, right? Talk a little bit about strength training.
Absolutely. That's the big thing that I think that we have come to study and to realize is that resistance training or some weight training is really important. When I talk about 150 minutes of exercise, that doesn't mean I have to be walking around a treadmill. Absolutely. Doing some resistance training and lifting is going to be important, and that's vital. So it improves you're going to have less arthritis from doing those. We're going to be stronger. We're going to have better maintenance. So we'll have more, fewer injuries. But resistance training is vital, and it's kind of an interesting thing that we always think about lifting weights, and then we're young, we lift weights, but it's actually becomes more and more important as we age to be able to do those things. Not lifting heavy necessarily, but going with higher reps, smaller weights, but going through those range of motions, and that's what's going to get us prepared. But you're right, lifting, we become accustomed to lifting whatever we're going to lift. So if you're out doing your chores, if you're doing whatever, it's one thing. But being able to importantly, lift contralateral muscles that you might be using when you exercise or when you're doing your chores, those things, you will absolutely feel better, and it's vital to do.
Talk about my dad always used to say, well, like when he was 70, he's like, I'm not doing that shit. I didn't do that stuff before. Why would I start it now? Yeah, it's never too late to start weight training, is it? I don't care if you're 14 or if you're 74 or 84 for that matter.
Well, certainly if you learn to do it with correct technique,
Yeah.
you're not going to have the injuries as long as we do it with correct technique. You start slow, and you're absolutely going to gain benefit. Yeah, we'll go light.
Right.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, I certainly don't lift like I used to in the numbers. And you know what? I don't care. Quite frankly, when I look back at how I used to do it, I think, my gosh, I wasted a lot of time on moving some heavy weight that wasn't necessarily beneficial. That now, as we look and we are much better with those things, the functional lifting is so much better. So
right. One thing, and I'll bring this up in a couple of these other categories as we wrap up exercise here and go to the next category, but I always think to myself, how do I want my last decade of my life to be? Do I want to be able to get up? If I lay down on the floor, can I get back up off the floor easily? Or if my grandkids run in, can I grab them and pick them up and throw them around? Can I lay in a chair and get back out easily? All those basic functions that we think, well, we'll do that later. We'll do that later. And you keep putting that stuff off. And it's like, good luck in your last decade then, if you're not paying attention. Comments on that?
100%. I think it's if we're aware of it, I do some, I think, well, my office is on the second floor. So I think, okay, every day I take the steps up and down and little things like that. But even things like when I look around, if I'm in church, and I'm amazed at, standing and sitting and lots of things, how many people have to grab the pew in front of them to be able to stand up. And that's a strength issue, that's a balance issue. So you've got to do that, but I don't have a pew in front of me to do that. There's some issues. So it definitely adds up. And I think one of the things is, one of the people, what they're going to say is, well, gosh, I don't have any time to do that. And I think, and
yes.
As much as anybody, Chris, that we can't make more time. So you have to make the priority is the key.
Exactly.
It's got to be a priority.
Yeah. Yeah. It's never too late. It's always a priority. And I love the comment on balance too, because, it's not always about how much you lift or what you do, but stand on one foot for a little bit. And, there's a lot of different things you can look up on YouTube. You don't have to spend a lot of money to be healthy. So the next category is sleep. Personally, I like to get about 8 hours of sleep. A lot of times I don't get that, but I feel 1,000 times better if I get 8. Supposedly, from the things I've read, 6 is sufficient for a lot of people. But I think, when you think of repair, your body's repairing itself at night when you're sleeping. It's recharging your brain and flushing things out. Talk a little bit about sleep. What should we be doing there when we're busy as hell?
Well, again, working on, you hit it right, getting sleep, but importantly, quality sleep. Quality sleep would be meaning that there's stage 4 or REM sleep involved. And that's the restful sleep. And if we're not getting quality sleep, we can sleep all day. But that again gets back to things like sleep apnea, for example. And you know, if someone's waking up and you're not feeling refreshed, and those are things that we always want to look into. But by not sleeping, you know, we're not getting that reparative time. And you know, we see people who have you know, either lack sleep or poor sleep hygiene, you know, have, you know, our, you know, blood pressure is elevated. We have, you know, more heart disease. Our, you know, the dementia rates are higher. Inability to focus is so hard. And when you don't get enough sleep and you're tired all the time, we have a tendency to then, you know, overindulge in things like caffeine, which, hey, don't get me wrong, I love some coffee in the morning, but you know, by taking in too much caffeine, you know, it isn't helpful for us either. So
And
sleep is vital.
yeah, and I like the idea, like you said, the quality of sleep. I mean, a lot of times people have, I mean, we took our TV out of our bedroom. I intentionally rarely will ever have my cell phone in our bedroom at night. I read a
Mhm.
great book called Sleep. What was it called? Sleep. I can't remember now. Sleep Healthy or something like that. Anyway, it basically talked about keeping the room black. It needs to be dark
Yeah.
when you sleep, and you know, and that kind of changed my sleep quality. I can get by with a little less sleep, so I think your quality thing is really hitting that.
It certainly is. I talk to people about, and there's a lot of people who have insomnia, and you can have insomnia for many reasons. In you know, farming, you know, just the stress alone can be
Yep.
causing some insomnia. But you know, same thing. Reduce, you know, caffeine intake. You know, prior to having your bedroom, you know, cooler versus hotter. Back to being, you know, don't have a TV on. Don't have those things which are really taking away from your sleep, having it, you know, dark in there. And you know, a lot of people will like supplements when they sleep, and you know, you know, I'm open to certain medications. Really, will just sedate us more than they give us good quality sleep.
Mm.
And so, I mean, we have to be, you know, careful of those things. A lot of people will utilize some melatonin, and I think small doses of melatonin occasionally can be, you know, okay. I'm not big into giving kids melatonin. It's a different hormone issue, but you know, so you know, I think again, you know, setting yourself up right, you know, doing some decaffeinated tea or something warm before bed, that can be, you know, helpful. You know, if you're someone who, you know, does exercise, and if you exercise in the evening and then you can't sleep, then, you know, try to work
Mhm.
it so you can exercise in the morning, get that cortisol
Yeah.
level up. So just those types of things.
Yeah, that's a good, excellent point because that's very true on the exercise,
Mhm.
having experienced that firsthand. The other
Same.
one I think too, you mentioned what was the term you used? I think it was like sedating yourself. I think sometimes people sedate themselves with alcohol at night, and I have an
Absolutely.
Aura ring. You can see it here on my
Hmm.
hand, and that measures, you know, sleep and your walking and all that kind of stuff. I know some people have the Apple thing or whatever, but it's interesting. Like if I drink alcohol or I don't drink alcohol, and it doesn't matter when I drink it during the day, from anywhere from noon on anyway, because it's not like I get up in the morning and drink it. But you know, if I have a
Right.
beer at four o'clock in the afternoon, or I don't have one, I recognize, you know, my heart rate's different, my sleep quality is better, my deep sleep is significantly more if I don't have the alcohol.
Hmm.
Talk a little bit about measuring. I always tell people, like, we do tons of financial stuff. And I always tell people you can't improve what you don't measure. What do you think about, you know, what's your thought about like measuring like with an Aura ring or any of these kind of things to measure your sleep so that you can improve it? Because it's hard to improve what you don't measure.
You're absolutely right, and there are getting to be a lot of studies now which will bring into and talk about, you know, is there, you know, can we do quantitative and qualitative measures of, you know, our heart rate, you know, sleep and all those things. How well does that really play out? And it turns out that, you know, whether it's the, you know, your watch or your ring, they're pretty accurate in their ability to follow, you know, and see how well you sleep. And I think most people can wake up in the morning and look at their watch or their ring and go, well, gee, how did I sleep? gee, I felt like I slept lousy last night, and you know it because your
Yeah.
body hurts, and you feel awful. Or when you wake up and say, "My goodness, I slept great last night," and
Mm,
then I like what you were talking about, which is really then going back and thinking, okay, what did I do last night, or didn't I do that helped
mhm.
me sleep? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I kind of joke with Alyssa sometimes. It's like I get up in the morning and I'll turn my phone on and I'll be like, I'm gonna look and see how I slept last night. Because it's exactly like you said. You kind of can tell when you wake up, either you slept well or you didn't. So let's keep moving. Let's hit nutrition. We'll throw water underneath that one or in that one because it's really critical. And maybe we want to start with water in nutrition. Talk about what does not enough water do? Because I guarantee you, a lot of us, some of the guys are pretty good. They'll take a water jug with them, quote unquote, and drink that. But a lot of people don't.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, if we're not getting enough water, then that puts us into a state of dehydration. And I say, what's not enough oil do to your motor? It's the same
Mhm.
sort of thing. And so the perpetual state of dehydration is, eventually it affects. Well, if we're not getting enough water, then we have a tendency to our body will try to retain the water that we are getting because it doesn't want to let go of it. And so then people who have, you'll have more edema, obviously, through, renal functions, can suffer. But your soft tissue, we're just not lubricating all of the things that we need to. So you'll have more aches, more pains. Sometimes people say, well, if I drink more, then I gotta pee more. Well, yes,
Weird.
if weird. It turns out that's of vital importance to kind of keep that all going as well. But what'll happen is yeah, your body, won't retain the water after a while when it realizes it's going to get enough water. So, how much water is always the question people say. Well, how much water should I drink? And and of course it depends on your size, but I think the very least amount anybody is, should be getting at least 80 ounces, and I think anything under that. And what is a hydrating fluid, right? I mean, that's sort of the old saying, and obviously I'm kind of old, and they used to say, well, if you can read a newspaper through it, that was the hydrating fluid. Nobody reads a newspaper anymore, but but so water, is the best. There's a lot of sport drinks which can be hydrating, but for most of us, we don't need electrolytes that much or perpetually. If you're having one of those a day is fine. Juice is hydrating, but you do get the extra sugars and calories for which we don't necessarily need. But having a little bit of that is okay. Other people will tell me, "Gee, I think I can read my newspaper through my, Bush Light," but we know that's if it's got like caffeine or alcohol, it's not going to be hydrating. So the best is just simply water, and there's so many options now of water. It's
Hmm.
it's crazy. So
Yeah, and I think a lot of these energy drinks, not to say any names, Gatorade or whatever, but you know how it is. I mean, I think it's just if there's some flavor or taste to it, then it's more people will reach for it more. But
yeah.
water is definitely the best. I mean, I did 75 hard. We've done some podcasts on that activity. The only thing is, I almost think though you can drink too much water because like in that program, you're supposed to drink a gallon a day. And when I started doing that, I mean, it was my body was like, you have way too much water here, dude, and I think you kind of got to work up to what is the right amount because it's probably different for everybody a little bit, isn't it?
Well, absolutely, and that's the challenge. I would say a gallon is quite a bit. Not just, I mean, that most of us we can do that. Some people who would have some health issues that might be too much, but
Mhm.
for the most part, so if we listen to ourselves and we do have really taking in water, our kidneys are pretty smart. It'll let us know, okay, we're thirsty, we're going to take in more water. We're pretty good at that. But yeah, you can get in too much, though I would say that's a pretty rare event compared to the people who don't get in enough.
Yeah. Let's keep rolling here on nutrition. I want to hit a couple other things real quick in nutrition: protein, carbs, and fats. And then sugar is in that carb category, and It's
Yep.
in every freaking thing. You go to the grocery store and it says fat free. In other words, it's full of sugar. It should just say
Yeah.
full of sugar instead of fat free. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of times people are still confused, and the grocery store is the most terrible place for confusing people.
Hmm.
Talk a little bit about, the protein, carb, fat relationship and what people need to be thinking about as simply as you can. Like for the farmer going to the field, what's some of the things that maybe you put in the cooler that you don't put in the cooler going to the field?
Well, I think you hit the big points right there, which carbohydrates. It really comes into you have like I said, fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. Sugars are a carbohydrate, and so all carbohydrates eventually get broken down into sugar,
Mhm.
and the sugar itself is very instant energy, but it's they had a an endocrinologist used to say that sugar is poison, and sugar is highly addicting. I think when you're going out, things we want to concentrate on are uh, proteins. I think are really good things to have with you. I think that the proteins will be broken down a little slower than the carbohydrates. It takes a few more water molecules to break down a protein. So that's why it's important to be hydrated, taking in those proteins. But it won't spike our insulin levels as much. It doesn't get absorbed and spike up insulin levels because the sugars went up high. And so that if we cannot spike those insulins, we're going to have a more consistent, blood sugar. We're going to feel better. We're not going to drop off because our insulin suddenly spikes and our sugars go down. So you won't have that yo-yoing. Things that are great proteins, of course, are animal proteins, and from the usual of beef, pork, chicken, turkey, all great. But you have fish, other sources of proteins. We can get dairy proteins, and of course, the dairy proteins will contain some fat. Sometimes you're going to have, but milk, cheese, eggs are great proteins. So all of those things are going to be good to have. I mean, there's some other caveats in there of we have to watch some sodium with some of those things, or some of the meats may have some sodium, so you have to watch some of those things. But in general, that's going to be better. So it's going to be some fats, and and gets back to that. What was it? 20 years ago, fat was the enemy, and now we realize, well, it's not entirely true. Not all fats are created equal, and you can have. I mean, I think we have to use some common sense. If you have a bag of orange slices, the little jelly things, right? They're fat free. Now we
Yeah.
know they can't be good for us, right? So it's kind of okay. This isn't good for us. So it's fat isn't always the problem. They're great fats to have, and so having that. But again, it doesn't mean that and some people will go with purely a carnivore type of diet, but I think most people feel best on a Mediterranean style diet where we do utilize some sugars. So fruits will have some sugars in them. Certain fruits are going to be better than others. If it's a typically if it's a tropical fruit, that gets broken down into a fructose sugar much quicker, and so it's not quite as good as say berries or apples, those kind of things. Those are much better fruit snacks to have. Nuts are particularly good to for snacks when we're out into the field. So I think that's the key is planning when you go out into the field. Know that you do need to eat. We got to hydrate. We got to do all these things. And if you want to be healthy, try to have that planned ahead so that you can take in those things as you're out working those longer hours.
One of the secrets I learned quite a while ago, kind of doing more of a higher protein diet, was I felt better. Like you said, you don't have that insulin spike, so you're not
Right.
tired at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you got to stop on the end with the tractor and sleep for an hour, and all of a sudden you've slept for an hour and a half, and then you wake up and like, holy shit, I slept for an hour and over an hour here,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And it's probably a combination of all the things we talked about. But what I try to throw in my cooler is I grill some steaks like on a Sunday night or Sunday afternoon or whatever. I'll get four or five steaks, and Alyssa will be like, "What the hell are you cooking all that steak for?" I'm like, because this is what I'm going to eat this week.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
expensive. Well, I want to be healthy, so I'm gonna cook these steaks. And what I do is I slice them into bite-sized little triangles, like the little cheese triangles you get. And then I might
Yeah.
get cheese triangles too, and I'll do
Hmm.
some whole milk cheese. I'm big on whole milk just because I think the fat that's to me, or at least for me anyway, it works for me as a healthy fat. And that satisfies you too, so that you're not hungry
Bingo.
every
Yeah.
freaking 10 minutes. And so I'll eat that. I'll take like 4 to 10 ounces of steak, depending on how long I'm going to be gone, of those little slices that are
Hmm.
easy to just like finger food while you're going across the field. I'll do some yogurt. I'll put blueberries, strawberries, and raspberries in with the yogurt, and then I'll put just a
Hmm.
little bit of local honey on it, just
Yeah.
because I like it. Gives it a little bit of sweetness, but you don't get too crazy with the honey. You don't let it float in the honey. And then, like you said, an apple once in a while or whatever. And I stay away from bread and all that crap when I'm busy, and then I'm not tired. I mean,
Yeah.
even whole, like, people make sandwiches. That's the number one thing I think guys take to the field. And if you can take just the meat, but even
Hmm.
instead of like the deli meat, like steak and, like you said, chicken, what'd you say, chicken, beef, and pork. I mean, take a pork loin and cut that sucker up and cut it in those pieces too. I mean, just some ideas, you know.
Well, and you're right. I mean, and that's in the idea. The whole idea of that was you're prepping ahead of time, and you're going to make better choices. And they are going to be better choices. You're going to feel better,
Yeah.
and with it, well, and what happens with that? If I'm feeling better, you're going to be more productive. And
Hmm.
gets back to the title of this: if you're more productive,
You're gonna make
you're
a lot
going to
more
get these
money.
things. You're going to make more money. Just
Yeah,
the way it is.
exactly.
Yeah.
It does. And I find that I eat healthier when I'm busy because of the cooler. If you lock yourself
Hmm.
in a tractor for 14 hours and you only eat what's in the cooler, and then you go home and drink some more water and stay clean and, shower, a hot shower, and then go to a cold bed that's dark room, you complete that full cycle that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
So what I want to wrap up with is a couple of key things here. I think we've hit enough on nutrition. We could talk about that all day long.
Hmm.
Mental health. I just want to ask you like one kind of key question there. How often do you see people come to you that are stressed because of work, life, or inappropriate life balance and all that kind of stuff that, they leave and you're like, this is kind of a mental health thing, maybe almost more so than a physical thing. And then the mental health is what starts to screw up your physical health. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, what are you seeing in society, like from when you started to where we're at now as a society? Are you seeing a big change, no change? What are you seeing?
Was an enormous change. The prevalence is monumental. In a day, if I seeing my typical 25 or 26 patients, I would say half of those have some component of mental health, and that's really difficult. In the emergency department, if we look through those, uh, about 75% will have some mental health issues. And again, that doesn't mean they came in, for some breakdown or anything like that, but a component of this, with anxiety. Right now, we know through some studies that like adolescent females, this is we've never seen numbers of anxiety and stress that we see now. I mean, it's remarkable. I think there's so many things that are probably contributing into that, but it's certainly a pandemic, much and more of a pandemic than our previous just pandemic, which contributed into the mental health. But that's my
Right.
opinion.
No,
Yeah.
it's very true. And then, some of the things that we've seen, even just in the work we do with family businesses, trying to transition to the next generation and trying to hold things
Hmm.
together and trying to grow the business. And then sometimes my wife always says I'm like super guilty of saying yes to everything. It's like, if there's an opportunity to do this, an opportunity to do that, you say yes to, I think we say yes to too many things. And I think one of the things that, from a mental health standpoint is some of us need to learn how to say no more often. And I'm guilty. So I'm like,
No,
I'm,
I understand the same.
yeah,
Yeah.
and Alyssa always tells me, she's like, just recognize if you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And it's so true. And I think, sometimes stress is self-induced by
Yeah.
a lot of us because everybody listening to this are entrepreneurial, executive minded, growth oriented, successful business people. And I think we're in control of our own destiny, even when we think we aren't. Any comments on that? And then we'll switch to the last thing.
Well, you're 100% right. I mean, I think that one, recognizing, what the stress is doing to us, and then, appreciating how powerful stress and anxiety can be into making us feel, poorly, and what it really does to our physical health is vital. Working on a plan to do something about that. You're 100% right. It's constantly saying yes to people. You build up this farm and do everything. So you want to, you really want that to continue to be a success, and you do, but you eventually find you can't do everything, and that's stressful. I always say I have, I think a little, OCD. I mean, I just like things the way they are. But when I can't do the things that exactly, it's just part of it. But what happens when you can't do those things? That's when I know that's the most stressful time, because I want to control all those things, and it's the control that can be the real challenge there. And I like to control things, and it's just I can't control everything. But I think appreciating it, knowing where we're at, and then doing things to help that along. Eating clean, exercising, the sleep, hydrating, all of the things we talk about will help with stress.
Mm-hmm. I always talk about 3 mental health things that exist in all of us. And I've done a couple of podcasts on 19 Minutes, our subscriber podcast, that if people haven't listened to it, I recommend you go back and listen to it, because I did a lot of research on these 3 basic components that we all have. And it's called insecurity. It's insecurity, control, and ego. Or I actually say it the other way around: ego, insecurity, and control. And we all have an ego to varying degrees, and we all have insecurities, and we all want control. And I think it just seems like, for a lot of us, when any of those things are out of compliance with what we feel they need to be, it definitely kind of throws us out of kilter. But that's why I was asking you that, because I was suspicious that it probably led into some physical problems, and too, the mental stuff leads to that.
Tremendous amounts, and it's tough. I feel for people, because these are difficult things. Anytime that you're struggling with depression or anxiety, and you're having feelings that are that you really can't articulate or even control, you think, why am I feeling so nerved up and anxious? And I shouldn't be feeling that way. And you are. That's hard. So it's, finding a way to mitigate that is really important. Or talking to somebody, or finding what works for you, which is important.
Yeah, the help is out there, and I think the stress level is, with where commodity prices are as we record this in March of 2024. Commodity prices have really come down, margins are tight, stress is there, and that's kind of why I wanted to do this today. So the last component, safety. Every spring and fall, we do ourselves, and I'll provide this to anybody listening. We put together a pre-spring and a pre-harvest meeting, and the first probably 40% of the meeting is around safety. We bring our insurance agents in and stuff, and we talk about safety things. My question to you is, what are some of the things that you've seen in your career that, if safety would have been implemented in the business, and it doesn't have to be just farming, it can be construction or whatever, but it's if a safety thing would have been implemented, or would have been, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, implemented into the system, it would have prevented that. Because a lot of times when we do safety stuff, you can't measure that, right? It's like we have a safety meeting, and you prevented somebody from either being hurt real bad or killed, and you'll never know that, because but so my question to you is, what things have you seen, and any comments on that thought process?
Yeah, I think over the years, I mean, obviously it's changed. I mean, we can all remember, when we were young, seeing, some guy who only had, one arm because, the two-row picker that he had his arm, taken off, something along that line. But I think to a certain degree, a lot of the machinery, there's been a lot of safety that's put into that. One of the problems that we run into is through time, or uh, we kind of bypass some of the safety features of the very machinery we're working with, which is
Mhm.
a real problem, obviously. And I think, so there's the machinery issues with injuries. We're also in now, a lot of the farmers, you don't just have one farm you're at, right? You're going from one farm to the next. And so we have equipment we're getting to and from, and we're out into traffic, and we know how patient people are now. And of course,
Yeah.
you get people are on their cell phone, and they're getting, and so that is a huge issue. I wonder always how many injuries or accidents occur, through farm equipment that are on the road versus on, in the field. And I think that it's almost sometimes safer in the field than it is on the road.
Mhm.
But
It is.
yeah, and then there's the other safety issues, which probably we don't think about as much, but it's the air quality, and I contend that the air quality is, I think we do a really good job of, I think the air quality is improved, but you get air quality issues, or somebody who's got some lung issues. So being smart and saying, okay, if I need to wear a mask, keep this dust particles out, I will, or things like wearing sunscreen, which is important. We don't think of that. I'm like, oh, I'll just get going. Well, in 20 years, when we're digging a basal cell carcinoma out of your scalp, it's probably not as good. So I think injuries are, let's face it, it's farming is as dangerous of an occupation as there is. So and I don't know. We see a lot of injuries, so but I will say, but thankfully, different than what we saw 20 years ago.
Yeah, I still think one of the big ones that we still have today yet that we've had, it seems like almost forever, is the noise level.
Mm-hmm.
So like in the fall, like I load the trucks and stuff, and if you take your phone, you can measure like the decibel level or whatever, and it's like in the danger zone. And it's like I'm doing that, and I'm like, I don't even think it's that loud. And then,
Yeah.
my wife will say something to me, and I say what every single time. She's like, "Do you ever say anything except for what?" I'm like, I can't hear you. And so I know for a fact I have hearing damage, and I guarantee you a high percentage of the people listening to this probably need to have the volume higher, because
Mm-hmm.
just because of the hearing loss. And it's pretty easy to buy a package of earplugs and stuff,
Yeah.
and you can buy 1,000 of them for not very much money. And I think it's just having that stuff available for employees and stuff too, and having that safety meeting and talking about those things, and just weird things too, like like if you mentioned the highway, like going down the highway. One thing I learned a couple of years ago, if you're going down the highway with a tractor that can get off the road, in other words, most of the stuff anymore is too freaking wide for the road. You got to
Mm-hmm.
get way the hell off just to not cross the center line, because that is one thing you're not supposed to do, is cross the center line.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you're going down the road with something that does fit on there, like a standard tractor with no duals or anything on it, a lot of times if you watch guys, they'll get off the road a little bit to let somebody pass or whatever. If you get hit doing that in the process of that, you're at fault. I never realized that. And the other reason for that is the expectation is that you stay on the highway, and then people are supposed to slow down to the pace of the machine. That's another law, which people never do, but you're supposed to
No.
slow down to the pace of the machine that's in front of you, regardless of what it is, car, machine, truck, whatever, tractor, whatever, and then proceed with the pass. And that's a law. I mean, we had a DOT officer come and do a safety training for us a couple falls ago, and it was just phenomenal, the things that we learned. And so I think that's something to throw out there too, is, having people like yourself come and sit in on a safety meeting and just talk about some of these things. I mean, I need to hire you to come to our safety meeting this spring. I mean, literally, because I think, just having these conversations, if it prevents somebody from having a major hearing loss or an eye injury or something, what's that worth?
You're absolutely right. I love the idea. You talked about having, a bunch of, earplugs to get in. So, and the key to that is I got to have the earplugs, but then have them within reach.
Yeah.
Because what happens? You get going. I'm going to get in the tractor. I should get out and grab some earplugs. You don't do it. So if you have, all right, I'm going to have, a
Fill the
package.
ashtray with them because nobody should be smoking in them damn things
Yeah,
anyways.
exactly, exactly. So doing those things, you go, okay, I got them. Yeah, they're here. I'll put them in, and it is, and we've gone a long way. When before we had cabs on everything, everybody, all the farmers and all lose their hearing more in their left ear as they're looking back all the time. And that left ear was towards the muffler. Well, now we're inside, but the machinery is just bigger, and it's large machinery. It's going to be noisy,
Oh yeah.
and so
Even like
hearing is an
semis.
issue.
Yeah, I mean, most guys have semis anymore, and most of the semis, and some of these, we have one too that's got straight pipes on it. Like, what the hell do you have that on there for? I mean, it just makes it loud in the cabin. If you measure
Yeah,
the noise level, and then you're in that stuff for 10 hours, or even, combines and tractors and stuff, it's not just the amount of volume, probably, it's also the duration of it too, right? It's like how
absolutely.
long are you exposed to it?
Well, and it's that decibel, but it's that pitch. Is it a high pitch? Is it a low rumble? And so you start to lose different hearing levels depending on the exposure to how much you've seen. And some of these things are a high pitch whine that you may not appreciate. Like, it's not too bad, or this low rumble that doesn't bother me too much. But over time, it all is a problem.
Yeah. What was that? No, I'm just kidding. Um, so, hey, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I'm super glad we finally got connected. I apologize. I was trying to get hooked up with you a couple of times, and my schedule gets a
uh,
little crazy this time
That
of
works
year.
great tonight, so it's good.
Yeah, I think you're still in the doctor's office. It looks like, aren't you?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
like you're home away from home.
You know how that goes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Well,
I got to work on that.
we need to get you out here for our safety meeting, and then after that, we got to put
Yeah,
you in a tractor and let you have some fun. Bring the kids out, and we'll have some
yeah,
fun.
yeah. My days of being all that helpful in the tractor are pretty limited. I haven't had to do anything on the farm for quite a few years, but I do enjoy it. I enjoy the agribusiness, and I enjoy when I get to talk with you. Simply, it's fun to like to see what's kind of going on in the ag world. I enjoy it.
Oh, we definitely need to get you out here. You don't even have to
Yeah,
steer anymore. You just ride along, all the way from the end rows to everything. Everything's kind of automated. So, but with
perfect.
that said, again, Kurt, Dr. House, we sincerely appreciate your contribution. This helps a lot of people. And the reason we do this podcast on, whether it's on the markets or business development, whatever, it's truly to help people. I mean, we love our clients, we love our customers, we love the agricultural community, and that's why we do what we do. Is we want to be out there with things to help people. And again, really appreciate your contribution. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
All
Be
right.
safe.
Yeah, we'll do. Yeah, everybody be safe out there, and hopefully this
Indeed.
was helpful. And again, it's all about figuring out how you take your health and turn it into wealth, and that's really kind of the whole objective of this conversation. And we appreciate everybody, and we will catch you again next time on the AgView Pitch.